I spent $32,000 to fly my family to my wedding, but my parents changed it to a Europe trip. So, I'm Jessica Moore. I'm 32 now, working as an investment banker in Manhattan. Sounds impressive on paper, right? I mean, I make good money, wear the tailored suits, smile politely, while sipping overpriced coffee in conference rooms with skyline views. But truth is, behind that glass wall, I'm basically invisible. And not because of the job or the stress or even the hours. It's because I've spent every single year of my life being invisible to the two people who should have seen me the most, my parents, Dawn and Sandra. I'm the older daughter. My little sister Claire is 3 years younger than me, and let's call her the family favorite. No sarcasm. No exaggeration. That's just what it is. From the moment she could form sentences, my parents hovered around her like she was the second coming of the Messiah. Meanwhile, I was the background noise. Helpful, quiet, dependable, and completely overlooked. And I didn't really notice it when I was little. You don't, right? You just kind of adapt. But there were moments, clear as day memories that still hit me in the gut like they just happened. Like when I was 8 and came home beaming because I got the highest score in the school spelling bee. The prize was a little plastic trophy and a bookstore gift card, which I was so excited about. My mom barely looked up from folding laundry. "That's nice, honey," she said, then turned and asked Claire if she wanted to help her make brownies. Claire was 5 and couldn't even spell her own name without swapping letters around. Or the time I was 16 and won the state math competition. Huge deal. I worked my butt off for that, studying every night for weeks while balancing part-time work and AP classes. The final was 2 hours away in Albany, and I remember calling home after I found out I won, absolutely shaking with joy. My mom's response: "Oh, that's wonderful, Jess. But we can't come. Claire's having a party for getting into community college that night. You understand, right?" And I did. That's the worst part. I always did. I smiled, hung up the phone, and sat on the steps of that school alone while the other kids took pictures with their parents. That night, I treated myself to a gas station donut and drove home like it was any other Tuesday. It didn't stop after high school. I got a full scholarship to Columbia. Claire barely graduated and flunked out of her first year at a local college. My parents acted like it was a phase. "Not everyone's academic," they said. Meanwhile, when I got a job offer from a top investment firm after graduation, they didn't even ask what my starting salary was. Claire started dating this guy who owned a landscaping business, and suddenly we were all expected to attend his family's cookouts like they were black tie events. I bought my first apartment at 26. A small one-bedroom in Brooklyn, nothing flashy, but mine. No one came to see it. No housewarming. My mom said it was too far, and she'd already seen enough city apartments on HGTV. But when Claire got engaged and moved in with her fiancé, in a rented duplex an hour from the city, my parents posted 20 photos on Facebook like she'd just bought a mansion. At 30, I got promoted to VP. My name went on the door. My face was in a trade magazine. It was the biggest milestone of my career. My parents? "That's great, sweetie. Is Claire still looking for a job? Maybe you can help her out. She's been feeling discouraged lately." And I actually did. That's the messed up part. I helped Claire rewrite her resume, prepped her for interviews, even pulled strings to get her an interview at my firm. She wore a cardigan with unicorns on it and left early because it just wasn't her vibe. My boss laughed about it for a week. What finally broke me, what really, truly cracked something in me, wasn't even some big event. It was last Thanksgiving. Claire had a stomach bug. My mom called and asked if I could bring her some soup since she couldn't possibly drive while Claire was sick. So I did. I went to the grocery store, bought her favorite kind, creamy chicken wild rice, and dropped it off. Claire didn't even come to the door. My mom opened it, took the bag, said, "Thanks, Jess," and shut it before I could even say hi. On the drive home, I realized something that gutted me. My mom never asked if I was spending Thanksgiving alone. Never even asked what my plans were. And yeah, I was spending it alone. I hadn't told anyone, hadn't made plans, just assumed I'd be working through it like I always did. That was the moment I knew I was done playing this game. I started saying no. Just no. No to driving out to help Claire move. No to the group texts about family dinners I was never invited to. No to pretending I didn't notice the favoritism. My mom called me selfish. My dad said I was being dramatic. Claire texted me a string of guilt-tripping messages that ended with, "You've always been jealous of me anyway." Jealous? Of what? I haven't spoken to them in 6 months. My phone's been quiet. No one checked in on my birthday. No one asked if I was okay when a coworker died and I flew out to his funeral alone. And maybe that's the hardest pill to swallow, that your absence doesn't even register, that you can cut yourself out of a picture and no one even notices the gap. But I notice. And as much as it hurts, there's also this quiet strength in it. Because I'm not invisible to myself anymore. I don't know if they'll ever see me for who I am. But at least I do now. By the time I got the scholarship letter from Princeton, I already knew I wasn't coming back. I hadn't even packed yet, hadn't figured out housing or transportation. But the moment that envelope hit the kitchen table and I saw full academic award printed in bold at the top, something clicked inside me and stayed locked ever since. I remember holding it up to my parents like a white flag they didn't even recognize. My dad glanced at it, nodded once, and said, "That's good, Jess," then turned back to Claire, who was complaining about the cost of car repairs. She'd hit a mailbox backing out of our driveway. Again, there was no celebration, no dinner, no "we're proud of you." No questions about when I'd move or what I needed. Just Claire telling my mom that the mechanic was trying to screw her over and she didn't have the money to fix it. My mom said, "Don't worry, sweetie, we'll take care of it." Then she looked at me and added, "Oh, and we'll need the car this week, so maybe hold off on any Princeton trips until we figure that out." That was the last real conversation I had with them before I left. I left on a Tuesday. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't even leave a note. I packed my things into 2 suitcases while they were out grocery shopping with Claire and her boyfriend and caught the late Amtrak to New Jersey. I had 2 roommates waiting for me in a shared dorm on campus and a growing fire in my chest that burned through any guilt I might have had. I didn't run away to hurt them. I ran because staying was starting to hurt me. Princeton was the first place in my life where I felt like I could breathe. I didn't have to be anyone's backup plan or shadow or reliable older sibling. I didn't have to play the good daughter just to be ignored. People there knew me as Jessica Moore, the scholarship kid who could break down market behavior better than half the professors. I aced every finance class they threw at me and worked 2 part-time jobs just to remind myself that I had earned all of it. And not one single test, paper, or job ever asked me who my sister was. I graduated magna cum laude and landed my first position at a hedge fund in Midtown before I'd even walked the stage. At 23, I was getting coffee with analysts who owned brownstones and had yachts named after their kids. At 25, I was running my own team. And by 30, I was sitting in a glass office near Bryant Park with a 7-figure portfolio and my name printed on quarterly reports sent out to investors who trusted me with more money than my parents had ever seen in their lives. I bought my own apartment, a 2-bedroom with skyline views and a kitchen I rarely cooked in. I traveled when I wanted to, dated occasionally, kept busy. My days were booked in 15-minute increments. My inbox looked like a ticker tape. And yet every holiday, I still found myself answering the same phone calls. Don's voice crackling with static, Sandra's breathy excitement, always asking how Claire's been having a tough time, or Claire might be stopping by later, or Claire's thinking of going back to school. They'd ask how I was only in the first 30 seconds out of politeness, like it was a formality, then pivot right back to their golden child. I never got a single question about my job, my apartment, my life. Just story after story about Claire's dog getting sick, Claire's neighbor being rude, Claire needing help with a down payment. Oh wait, scratch that. They already helped with that. They bought her a house 3 doors down from theirs. They said it like it was nothing. It just made more sense than paying rent. My mom told me casually one Christmas Eve when I called to check in. I'd just gotten off a red-eye from Tokyo and was standing in my apartment in heels with a suitcase still by the door, half drunk on caffeine and silence. It's such a cute little place, Jess. You should see it sometime. 2-car garage, backyard. And she's already got friends on the street. You know, the kind of place people settle down in. I didn't ask how much it cost. I didn't ask why they'd never offered to help me. Even when I was living off ramen in a shared dorm room, working double shifts, and skipping meals to save cash. I didn't ask because I already knew the answer. They never saw me. Not really. I was the straight A student who didn't need anything. I was the safe one. The she'll-be-fine daughter. Claire was the needy one. The one who cried louder, stumbled more, always had a crisis to solve. They gravitated toward her like she was magnetic, like I didn't exist outside of a resume and a phone number they used twice a year. Sometimes I'd catch myself looking through old photos on my phone, filtered, posed, cold little rectangles of my life. Me with colleagues on a rooftop, me in front of a presentation board, me alone in Capri. None of them ever had my parents in the background. None had Claire. They didn't ask to visit. They didn't invite me over. I went from being ignored in person to being ignored long distance. I'd become the success story they didn't want to hear about. On holidays, I sent gift baskets. Classy ones, imported chocolates, high-end wine, carefully wrapped. Claire posted about them on Instagram like she picked them out herself. My mom texted once, "Thanks for the treats, Jess." Claire loved the biscotti. That was it. No call. No, "we miss you." Just Claire's reaction, front and center, as usual. And every now and then, not often, but enough to keep me aware of it. I'd wonder what it might have felt like if I'd had a different kind of family. If I'd been born into one of those houses where people showed up, asked questions, remembered birthdays. If maybe the problem wasn't me, but the wiring in them. Because I've built this life on my own. Brick by brick. Quietly, efficiently, with no one cheering from the sidelines. And they still talk about the one who needed help tying her shoes at 27. The silence between us isn't loud. It's comfortable now. Expected. Like background noise in an elevator you don't really hear. I don't bring them up to coworkers or friends. I stopped sending photos. Stopped inviting. Stopped explaining. I don't hate them. That's the thing. I don't even think about them most days. But when I do, it's like glancing at a house I used to live in, still standing, still there, just not mine anymore. It was the kind of event I usually dreaded, a charity gala in Midtown, full of glossy smiles and shallow conversations about philanthropic portfolios and ski homes in Aspen. I went because the firm had sponsored a table, and skipping it would have been noted. So I put on the dress, did my hair, smiled through champagne flutes and pleasantries, nodding at names I recognized from boardrooms and industry gossip. I wasn't looking for anything that night. Especially not someone. Daniel wasn't like the rest of them. That was obvious the second he spoke. He was introduced to me by someone's overly enthusiastic assistant who thought two single people in their 30s being in the same room constituted matchmaking. I was prepared to grit my teeth through another boring conversation. But then he asked if I'd seen the architectural details in the restored atrium, and when I admitted I hadn't even noticed, he offered to show me. Not in a showy, performative way, just like it mattered to him. And somehow, it started to matter to me too. He talked about design the way I talked about markets, with precision and affection, like it lived in his bones. He didn't flinch when I told him what I did, didn't blink at the number, didn't make a joke about how intimidating that must be. He just nodded and asked real questions. Intelligent ones. He listened. He remembered what I said. And for once, I wasn't defining myself in the negative. Not Claire, not the daughter who left, not too ambitious. I was just Jessica, and that seemed to be enough. We started dating quietly. He lived in Boston, ran a boutique architecture firm with a focus on sustainable coastal design, and split his time between city work and projects on the Cape. Every Friday, one of us took the train. Weekends were slow, soft. Cooking dinner, long walks, reading next to each other in silence. He never made me feel like I had to perform, never measured my success like a weight I had to make smaller to be lovable. If anything, he admired it. Not in a shallow, gold digger way, but like someone who understood what it cost me and respected that I'd still paid in full. After a year, he proposed on the beach in Cape Cod. No crowd, no flash mob, no drone photos. Just us, barefoot in the sand, the wind pulling at my coat, and him on one knee with a small velvet box that looked absurdly fragile in his work-worn hands. I said yes before he could even finish the question. I said yes with my whole chest, like I was finally stepping out of a shadow I didn't even realize I'd been standing in. That night, back at his house, I called my parents. I don't know what I expected. Maybe something small. A flicker of excitement. A sliver of warmth. My mother answered on the third ring, her voice a little too sharp for a Saturday evening. I told her I had news. Told her about the proposal, about the ring, about the plans we'd started to sketch out, maybe a summer wedding, maybe something simple by the water, something that finally felt like mine. There was a pause, long enough for me to think the line had dropped. Then she said, "That's wonderful, Jess. But Claire is pregnant again." I just stood there, staring out the window at the dark waves hitting the shore, the phone still pressed to my ear like maybe I'd misheard her. Like maybe there was more coming. Some kind of congratulations. Some kind of joy. But that was it. That was the whole response. One sentence. One dismissal. One redirection toward the one person they always found more important. I said okay. Said I had to go. Hung up before I let the silence become something I'd regret. Daniel was in the kitchen pouring wine. He looked at me and didn't even have to ask. He just set the glasses down and pulled me into his arms like he could absorb all the disappointment through sheer presence. I didn't cry. I didn't rant. I just stood there, breathing him in, wondering why I'd let myself believe that this time would be any different. Because it wasn't. Nothing had changed. Not really. They still couldn't see me. Not even when I was standing in front of them, holding the kind of love they always said they wanted for me. Not even when I gave them a chance to show up. Not even when I called. And maybe the cruelest part is that I hadn't even expected much. Just a few words. Just a flicker of recognition that my life was mine, that it mattered. Instead, it was Claire again. Always Claire. Even when it wasn't. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of the guest bed in a room that still had faded posters from Claire's teenage years on the walls, the kind of leftover clutter no one bothers to remove, and I stared at the ceiling trying to make sense of how we'd gotten here. But there was no mystery anymore. It had never been about confusion or miscommunication or bad timing. It was a choice. A deliberate one. And not even a surprising one, if I was being honest. just the final blow in a long list of quiet betrayals. The next morning, I went downstairs early. My mom was in the kitchen, already dressed, scrolling through her phone while the kettle boiled. She didn't look up. My dad came in a few minutes later, muttered something about the news, sat at the table like it was any other day. I waited until they were both in the same room before I spoke. So who was planning to tell me? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Was it going to be a call? A text? Or were you just hoping I wouldn't find out until after? They looked up like deer in headlights. My mother set down her phone. Jessica, it's not that simple. No, I said. It is. I paid for 8 tickets to Maui. I booked the rooms, arranged the transportation. You accepted. You said yes. And behind my back, you were trying to reroute everything for a vacation in Europe. Claire walked in then, rubbing her belly like it was some kind of shield, and immediately jumped in with, we weren't going to cancel. We just thought, maybe the kids would get more out of Paris. You know, museums and stuff. I stared at her, stunned. You mean more than their aunt's wedding? She had the audacity to look offended. You don't have to make it a guilt trip. You have your life. Your career. You don't even live near us. This trip was important for our family. I laughed. One sharp sound. I am your family. Jess, my dad said, like he was trying to calm things down. It's not like that. Claire's been dreaming about going to Paris for years. And I've spent years trying to get you to see me. I said, louder now. I tried everything. I invited you. I paid for it. I thought maybe, you'd finally want to show up for me. My mother's mouth tightened. You're overreacting. No, I said, standing up. I'm finally reacting exactly as I should have a long time ago. They didn't follow me when I walked to the front door. No one tried to stop me. No one asked me to stay. I turned back one last time, my voice calm and final. Keep your tickets. Enjoy Paris. But I will no longer be a part of your lives. Then I walked out. And this time, I didn't look back. The morning of the wedding, the light came in slow and gold through the open windows of the villa, and for once, there wasn't an ache in my chest. No second guessing, no lingering hope that maybe I'd hear a knock on the door and see my parents standing there, full of apologies and changed hearts. That kind of hope had been burned out of me weeks earlier, left behind in the driveway of a house I would never enter again. What I had instead was quiet and clarity, and the steady hum of people who had chosen to show up not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The ceremony was set just before sunset, with the ocean stretching out behind us and the wind low enough to keep the candles lit. I had expected the walk down the aisle to feel like a hollow compromise, like something beautiful tainted by the absence of the ones who were supposed to be there. But it didn't, because as the music started and the guests stood, I saw Aunt Diana waiting for me at the start of the path, wearing a blue silk dress and the same calm eyes I remembered from childhood. We hadn't spoken in decades, not since my mother cut her out over some long-forgotten argument. But when she got my invitation, she sent back a handwritten note. Asterisk, I will be there. It would be my honor. Asterisk, and she was. She took my arm without hesitation, kissed the side of my head, and whispered, You look just like your grandmother. I don't know how I held it together. Maybe because I didn't want to cry through the vows, or maybe because for the first time in a long time, I felt anchored. The guests were a mix of friends I'd carried through every phase of my life. People who had seen me at my most polished and at my most unraveling. Colleagues who'd stayed after hours when I couldn't go home. Old classmates who remembered me before I was anyone worth Googling. And Daniel's family. Warm, loud, gracious people who treated me like one of them before I even knew what to do with that kind of acceptance. His mother hugged me every time she saw me. His sisters called me Jess, like we'd grown up in the same house. And his father gave a toast that made half the room cry. Daniel had invited a few people from the industry, clients, partners, former professors, and they all came, not out of obligation, but because they respected him and, by extension, us. One of them, a woman I'd only met twice before, pulled me aside during the reception and said, You've built something rare, not just a career. This. She gestured to the room, the candlelight, the laughter echoing from the beach. This is real. The ceremony itself was simple. No dramatic floral arches, no choreographed dances. Just us. The vows we wrote were honest and maybe a little messy, but they were ours. I told Daniel I'd spent most of my life trying to earn the love of people who couldn't give it, and that meeting him felt like being handed a language I didn't know I was fluent in. He told me he admired my fire, not in spite of how hard the world had made me work for it, but because of it. When it was done, and we were husband and wife, the applause didn't feel performative. It felt earned. Like everyone in that circle knew what it had taken to get there. Not just the planning or the distance or the logistics, but the grief, the letting go. We ate under strings of lights, passed plates of grilled fish and fresh pineapple, danced barefoot on the grass until well past midnight. There was no talk of who wasn't there. No mention of Claire. No whisper of excuses or justifications or what could have been. Only toasts that made my cheeks hurt from smiling and arms around shoulders and glasses clinking. I didn't feel alone. Not once. Not even for a second. It wasn't a spectacle. It wasn't about wealth or optics or proving anything to anyone. It was a celebration of who we'd chosen. The people who saw us, stayed with us, stood beside us when it would have been easier to step away. It was the kind of wedding I used to think I'd never have. Not because I couldn't afford it, but because I couldn't imagine what it felt like to be surrounded by real love. The kind that shows up without conditions. The kind that doesn't keep score. I used to think closure came in a conversation, an apology, a final reckoning. But that night, dancing under the stars in a white dress that didn't need anyone's approval, I realized I already had it. I had it the moment I stopped asking to be chosen and chose myself instead. A few days after the wedding, still barefoot most mornings and with sand in every corner of my luggage, I posted a single photo. It was one of the quieter shots, no staged kiss, no sweeping drone angle. Just Daniel and me standing under the canopy, backs to the ocean, his hand at the small of my back, my eyes half closed, smiling like I had nothing left to chase. The caption was short. I wrote, surrounded by those who truly wanted to be there. That was it. It took less than 24 hours for the messages to start. Claire was first. A text, of course. Wow, she wrote. So I guess you just forgot to mention there would be celebrities there? Some heads up would have been nice. No congratulations. No questions about how it went or what it felt like. Just resentment. Jealousy, barely dressed up as indignation. I stared at her message for a long time and didn't respond. Because what was there to say? I could have listed the names, explained who had supported me, reminded her I'd paid for her seat and her silence with the same stroke. But I didn't know her anything anymore. Not even clarity. My mother left a voicemail that same night. I saw her name on the screen and let it ring. When it finished, I listened once, just to be sure. Her voice was sharp. You humiliated us in front of all our friends. Do you have any idea what people are saying? You made it look like we didn't care. Like we didn't even want to be there. She paused, just long enough to sound theatrical, then added, we have been nothing but supportive, Jessica. And this is how you repay us. I deleted it after that. Not out of anger. Just exhaustion. Because that was the final answer I hadn't even realized I was waiting for. The confirmation that they hadn't seen a wedding, hadn't seen a daughter, hadn't seen a life being built. They saw a stage they weren't invited to. A spotlight they weren't under. And when it wasn't about them, it became an attack. But I didn't feel sad. Or angry. I felt clean. Because the silence that followed was the kind I could live with. It was mine. And I didn't fill it. Not with guilt. Not with explanations. Not with more attempts to make people care who never truly had. I sat with Daniel on the last night before we flew home. The two of us wrapped in a blanket on the deck while the waves broke in the dark, and I told him the truth. That the $32,000 I spent on their tickets, on the flights, the rooms, the chance to be seen, wasn't wasted. It wasn't a loss. It was a buyout. A final, clear transaction. And in return, I got my freedom. I bought my way out of a lifetime of pretending their love might one day feel like love. I bought the end of the guessing. The end of the performance. The end of waiting. It was the best investment I ever made.